You're listening to the Hirecalling podcast, your source for all things hiring, staffing, and recruiting. I'm your host, Pete Newsome, and I'm back today with Ricky Baez. Ricky, how are you today?
I'm doing amazing, Pete. Amazing. Ask me why. Go ahead, ask me why.
I always will. Why today?
I tried that new bacon ranch potato tots things from Zaxby's today that I saw on the commercial, and it looked beautiful in the commercial. The exact opposite when you actually buy it, and it was horrible.
So that's why you're doing great.
I'm doing great because I'm trying to find a way how to recover the rest of my day. And here we are right now.
You just wanted to bash those. That is in no way an answer to why you're doing great. You just wanted to bring up the whatever they are. I'm not familiar with those.
Yeah, well, good, because you're not missing anything.
I won't go out and get them now.
That's how I'm doing, sir.
All right. I don't know what to do with that. You threw me for a loop. But here we are. Uh-huh. It's another recording, so I'm going to throw you for a loop today because we didn't. I didn't ask you in advance for your opinion on this, so I'm going to hit you up right now, and we're going to talk about Bernie Sanders. How's that?
Oh, is he still sitting down in the cold with his little mittens on?
With his chair with his arms
folded. Somebody go get him. Somebody go get him. Poor guy.
He does show up quite a bit there.
Yeah.
Where he's sitting. No, I thought you were going to use that as an opportunity to make a Colonel Sanders comment, but you missed the
that's next week.
There.
That's next week. Yeah.
So, Bernie's been a little bit on Twitter for the past couple of days, commenting on the rail strike. So if I'm sure you're familiar with that. Yep. I think most of us are. And there were a couple of comments that he made that I wanted to pick your brain on as an HR professional, because in a way, I see those as sort of contradictory in nature. And so I wanted to talk about that for a minute. Are you comfortable talking about unions and rail strikes and Bernie? That sounds boring, but we can make it not boring.
Oh, unions are everything but boring, sir. Let me tell you, I've been in grievances left and right, and they're not boring at all.
So let me share. Being a Southerner, even though we recruit and staff nationally, unions aren't they're not really prevalent here, right? That goes without saying. And most of our business does evolve around companies who have some sort of presence in Florida or the Southeast, and that's how we've evolved. So even though we do business with companies in the Northeast, where I think of being mainly associated with unions, it's not been something that has come up on a very regular basis in my 2 decades of staffing. So what caught my attention this weekend was a comment that two comments that Bernie made. I call him Bernie as if I know him. Senator Sanders. Should we say that with some more formality?
I think we know him as Bernie Sanders.
We got to call him Bernie.
Yeah, we got to call him Bernie. We have to.
that Bernie made. One was focused around the number of sick days, which I think is what the big dispute is all about right now, is guaranteed sick days or lack thereof for the rail workers. Now, I think people should be able to, of course, not have to work when they're sick, but put that aside. This isn't really what I wanted to talk about. But what I think of as unions and what Bernie was going for with this comment that he made was all workers should be guaranteed these sick days. And I thought, okay, this is sort of the opposite of what I think of in the freelance market, where no one is guaranteed anything. So I'm a huge proponent, as I believe you are too, of freelance and what it can do. And I think it is an extremely healthy, beneficial way for workers to go about earning a living. But nothing is guaranteed there, right? So I want to talk about that a little bit, because I'm struggling with that right now, because I don't really see how that factors into the equation. So give me your thoughts first on unions as a whole. What purpose they serve.
Well, let's talk about why they started. Right now, I'm going to talk from an HR perspective. right? Not from a business owner perspective, but from a union perspective. But I'm going to talk about unions from an HR point of view. I've been involved with unions for about 15 years now, working with them, and I'm gonna sum it up in a nutshell. I understand why unions exist. They exist because back in before 1934, when the NLRA became effective, which is the National Labor Relations Act, and that is a law that is governed by the National Labor Relations Board, which does everything union. And the reason it came about is because there was a lot of progression in the United States economy as far as factories and work is concerned, and employers were focusing just on the bottom line, like just on it. Forget employer safety, employee safety, forget benefits. They will work them like 80 hours a week with minimum pay. Pretty much what the rest of the world kind of looks like to us when it comes to a working economy, or most of the world. I don't want to say the rest of the world, but it's surrounded around safety in the workplace, pay, and the tools necessary to perform their job. Because remember, back in the day, I don't know if you know the history of the Hoover Dam. When the Hoover Dam was being built many moons ago, their safety record was horrible. You had a line of people in the parking area. I don't want to say parking lot because there weren't that many cars back then. In the staging area, waiting in line until somebody got sick, died, or got injured, because they will be replaced within 3 minutes. They'll drag the body out and they'll bring the next person waiting in line, right? So that's before unions started, and then people started complaining, just lobbying their congressperson, and then next thing you know, these laws come into play. So we don't have enough time to talk about all about unions, but at the end of the day, it's an organization that steps in to be the in-between between the employer and the employee, to negotiate wages and to negotiate work environment and safety in the workplace. So at the end of the day, that's what it is.
Okay, so Hoover Dam, this is testing my history.
Mm-hmm.
Was I paying attention in history class? Was built during the Great Depression, was it not?
I believe so.
So the situation, the labor situation in the U.S. was vastly different than in what would be considered modern times.
Very much so.
Okay. Yep. So what you're describing in terms of safety conditions and excessive work hours, my first thought when I hear that is, why would anyone wait in line for that job? It sounds like a job that no one would want. Mm-hmm. You know that I believe very much in letting the market dictate, just economics 101, supply and demand in the labor market. It's the employer's obligation or the employer's role to make a position attractive enough for someone to want to be in that role. And if no one wants to be in that role, well, then that is on the employer to figure out how to make it more attractive. What you're describing is a very unattractive job by any reasonable definition. And yet there's, again, as you explained it, a line out the door in the most literal sense. So I don't know if that was exaggerated to illustrate the point, but
no, that was true. That
okay,
was
so
true.
that so what do you know the basis for that, on why there was so much demand for an unattractive role?
Well, back then, exactly how you said, during the Great Depression area, jobs were not easily found like they are today. So men, specifically men and some women, they would take some dangerous jobs just to put food on the table, just because there was nothing else available. So, again, that's before the 1930s. Great Depression was 1920. Oh, no, Great Depression happens around the end of 1920s. Right? Yeah, 1928 it started, whereas the Roaring 20s was the rise of the economy of the U.S. back then. But once 1928 or 1929 hit, that's when things really got bad. That's when the traditionalists, because we talked about generations, that's when the traditionalists would save a lot of stuff they normally wouldn't save. They'd hoard left and right, and they'll take dangerous jobs by today's standards, because back then there was just nothing else to do. And I don't want to say that alone sparked the union movement, but situations like that sparked the union movement. And then fast forward to 2022, the union is still alive and well today for the same reasons, different way of looking at it, but it's still to negotiate wages, pay, sick time, things like that.
So,
Yeah, go ahead.
we need, what's Joe Rogan's guy that he has? It always,
Jamie.
Yeah,
Jamie. We need
pull this
Jamie to
up.
bring something up. All right.
But while you were speaking, I did look up, and yes, it was built during the Great Depression. And a couple of these sources that I'm immediately seeing mentions that it was provided much needed work for thousands who were desperate, right? And so that in desperate times, desperate acts. So that makes sense why people would be willing to suffer through a terrible situation like that, right? They felt probably it was the only way to feed their family,
back then,
put food on the table, etc. So those days aren't here. We're in an era right now where, as of the latest Bureau of Labor Statistics report that I happened to be looking at earlier today, we have 10.3 million job openings and 6 million people looking for a job. So there are more jobs. Huh?
Yeah. Let's do some math here.
So the math indicates pretty clearly that no one has to suffer through that kind of situation unless they're willing to. So those conditions don't exist today, right? This is what I truly am trying to understand in this, because I'll finish the thought on what Bernie was. I'm just going with Bernie. What Bernie tweeted. The another message was, let me quote it for you now that I've of course gotten away from this. Let me be clear: the struggle is not over, and this had to do with the what they were trying to put in place. I think again was specific to sick days, was passed over the weekend. So his quote was in response to that. Let me be clear, the struggle is not over. I will do everything I can to make sure that rail workers in America are treated with dignity and respect. Okay, sure. I mean, fine. Yes, we want that. No one in their right mind would dispute that workers should be treated with dignity and respect. Non-workers should also be treated with dignity and respect.
True.
Stating the obvious. I don't know I'm having trouble equating these things, because again, I may be missing something obvious, and if I am, I want to understand. I'd love to bring a union boss on to enlighten me on this. But I see that as anything but dignity and respect when it comes to treating someone's profession and how they spend their professional day and time and effort and put their body on the line as a team sport. I think that is diminishing the individual, and I know that I'm missing something. I just don't know what it is. What say you to that?
So there's a huge difference, fundamental difference. Well, not fundamental, but there's a huge difference between back then and right now as far as unions are concerned. Back then, the struggle was real, right? OSHA wasn't there, safety standards wasn't there, people were dying, right? Just for simple mistakes, right? Now, unions now, I got to tell you, without me pulling some data, they're struggling. They are struggling right now. They're still really powerful in the United States, but I think as far as membership and numbers, they are struggling, because the reason unions are still relevant now, it has a lot more to do than tradition than anything else. You've got people in the workforce today, blue collar folks, plumbers, electricians, the backbone of America, that come from a long line of plumbers and electricians who believe in unions. And they grew up in an environment that says, do not turn into a corporate person, right? You get a union job, so you get your benefits, you get your pension. That's what they're told, right? When they're growing up. And right now, unions, again, are relevant just because, more tradition than anything else. But there are some organizations out there, Pete, that the safety issue is not as big as a concern as benefits and pay is, right? Because you still do have some leaders that are looking at the P&L so closely with blinders on, they forget about the employees. And when that happens so much, they voice their concerns to union halls. Now, real quick, here's what happens with a union hall, right? If let's talk about Florida, because I can't talk. If Florida is a right to work state, which means you don't have to join a union for you to get a job in Florida versus another state. In order for you to get a union job, you got to go to the union hall, right? And they provide that talent. But in Florida, if somebody doesn't like the situation that's happening at work, let's say they got 1,000 employees, right? Somebody goes to the union hall, they complain to the union hall, and then they send some people over to the job site. There's some laws and regulations about how that works. If they rally everybody and they get 30% interest, meaning cards, 30% interest of all the employees, so 30% of 1,000 is about 300 people, right? And then if you get 300 people in there, the next thing you know, you're going to have a union campaign. You're going to have an election going on. And now you got union people coming in telling you what to do from a business perspective. That kind of tells you where I lie on a union conversation. And that's, to me personally, that's a voice, that's a cook in the kitchen that does not need to be there. But we're still not done yet. Once you get that 30% and they have an election, what ends up happening, Pete, that's when the business needs to go all out and communicate all the benefits they have, to communicate all these things about how awesome things are right now. Because the only thing people need to ratify a contract, to ratify a union, is 50% of the votes plus one more of the people that show up. So let's do some math real quick. If there's 1,000 people in the center and only 10 people show up to vote, all you need is 6 votes to ratify a contract.
Wow.
For the entire 1,000 people.
So is generally, and I know there was recent talk of unions at, I believe, Starbucks,
yep,
Amazon,
and Amazon too.
Big companies. I wasn't close enough to what was actually taking place to have an opinion. But generally speaking, in a situation like that, is it a vocal minority who is pushing for it, or is the majority typically pushing for it? What I'm really asking is, on the surface, right, without slanting the information, there's a better way to phrase it. It's not immediately coming to mind. Is it beneficial to the employees? The forming of a union, I realize with the rail workers that already exist, unringing that bell is an entirely different conversation, but
it's beneficial for employees who work for an organization where the organization does not listen to the employee and does not respect the employee's safety.
Okay, so you mentioned safety a lot in this conversation, and I think of safety as being transcending unions. OSHA is who comes to mind for that, whose existence is entirely based around providing safety, for workers. So where does that overlap with what a union's responsibility would be?
Because from an OSHA perspective, safety is their only goal. From a union perspective, is only part of the overall existence. Because the other one is having the tools they need to perform the job and having the benefits that they need and having equity in the company, just all overall benefits. And again, that aside from safety, because OSHA takes care of that now, it's as profits started getting bigger, wages did not follow. And when you have a bunch of employees who feel like they've been shysted, if 30% of them decide to go to a union hall, you're going to have some issues, right? So what I tell clients is listen to your employees, listen to them. And if you cannot provide the pay and the benefits that they're asking for, let them know why. And it better be a really good reason. Otherwise, they're going to go and unionize on you. Next thing you know, because to me, in case you haven't noticed, folks, from an HR perspective, I don't like unions. I do not like unions. That's just my personal opinion. Because I rather deal with the employees directly. If there's any kind of a situation with a union, for example, if there's an investigation or something needs to happen, I have to have a union rep there. And a union representative that's there, it's sometimes the ones I've been involved with, they got really, really hostile. Because remember, their whole their whole reason for existing a union rep is to look out for the best interest of their member
Okay.
against me, the man, right?
Okay. So you in this capacity, as you're referring to, or HR, the employer,
Mhm.
right? You're the corporate entity, if you will.
I'm the evil guy, according to them.
Okay. So here's where I'm struggling in this. I'm I believe that the freelance market is the greatest route for employee freedom, respect, dignity, the things that Bernie Sanders says is necessary. It seems to be tying to a union,
Mhm.
and I'm struggling to connect these dots because um, I think as a freelancer, you only choose work where those things exist, right? Not
Mhm.
and so if it's being forced upon, if it's not, if it's unnatural, right? Where someone has to, it's sort of like a parent making a child apologize, right? The words may come out, but there's no sincerity behind it.
Got it.
As someone who's made my children apologize to their siblings many times,
Sorry.
yeah, well, I'm sorry would be even nice. It's usually I apologize in the most,
Oh, in the most
insincere
robotic
way.
way.
And so am I looking at this right? Or am I missing something really obvious? Because I think, wow, if the conditions are such that you have to have this overriding policy, or you have to band together to get it. My first question is, why don't you leave? Why get the, if it's so bad, why take it in the first place? So and I think if you're a rail worker, that's all you know. Maybe jobs are limited in your area. You may feel locked into that role. I think, right? Well, let me stop there and ask you, is that sort of the basis for why they deem this necessary in the first place, rather than just leave, go somewhere else? Don't remain in that bad situation where you need this third
Yeah.
party sort of group
So
to step in.
so I see where you're getting at, and I agree with you, Pete. If more people went the freelance route, we won't need unions. You're right. We because they will be in charge of them, right? People will be in charge of their own destiny when it comes to that. The reason I don't think that would ever happen is because there's a specific hunger that it takes for you to be an entrepreneur and a freelancer that I don't think everybody's cut out for. And the reason people stick with union life and union mentality, A, again, is how they grew up, and B, is easy. Is easy. You go in, you clock in 8 a.m., you clock out at 5 p.m. The contract specifically dictates what your job is like. No ifs, ands, or buts. You go in, you do that for 30 years, and you get a pension, right? That unions are made now, these days, 2022, for people who will like to keep that status quo of a career. And there's nothing wrong with that. There is nothing wrong with that. But what you're saying from a freelance perspective, I agree with you that if more people did that, we would need less unions. But I don't think that's going to happen just because how easy union makes work for some people. I'll give you a great example. Great example why I don't like unions, right? And this is the most basic example it can come up with. Let's say we have a company, and my job, Pete, is to turn a knob 20 times an hour. That's my job. Turn the knob 20 times an hour. Turn, 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 turn. In a union environment, it says I turn the knob 20 times an hour, and that's it. What happens if I stop at 45 minutes? I wait until the hour's done, because that's what the contract says. The contract says I'm not to work above and beyond that. Versus the same situation in a non-unionized environment. The boss says, "Oh, dude, you finished that in 45 minutes? Let's see what you can do in an hour." And they keep pushing those boundaries and pushing those boundaries. A good boss, however much more money this person makes above and beyond what they did against their colleagues, will pay them more. But the reasons unions come into play is that they keep forcing these folks to work more and more and more and not get any of the extra profits. And then boom, unions have to be there to keep everybody honest from that perspective.
So, man, there's so much going on in that
Oh yeah.
analogy, because it's unhealthy in a significant way, and that's how I describe freelance relationships as the most healthy form of work that you can do, where someone is choosing to trade their time and expertise and labor for income, right? Or
Mhm.
whatever they might do in exchange, right? So for a wage. And on the other side, you have an organization putting a value on that time, expertise, and labor that they need, and offering that. And if there is someone willing to take it, even at scale, right? I'm talking about this as if it's one at a time, but really that's what it is, because what you are describing is demoralizing and the opposite of what I think this idea of dignity and respect is, for another person. I mean, I'm trying to find why the workers, feel that this is in their best interest. Once again, it seems like just treating it as a team sport. And I'm really struggling with that. It sounds like one step above indentured servitude, and locking someone in to something that, where if what you're saying is what I have heard in the past, I think, about unions, is that whether you do your best, whether you do your worst, as long as you're checking the boxes, your income is going to remain the same, your job will remain intact, and that's it. which is not healthy.
It worked
So
before. It's not working now. It's not working now. Historically, union memberships have been dropping year over year.
So
year over year.
Put the rail workers aside for a second, because I say for the last time the caveat that there are clearly things that I don't understand at work with that. No pun intended there. But looking at these Starbucks employees who have, if you are eligible, capable, qualified to be hired at Starbucks, there's very good chance, Starbucks is not putting their restaurants or their coffee shops, whatever.
I mean, they're
stores.
fast casual. I don't know.
They're not putting their stores in desolate areas, right? They're not there. So presumably there are other jobs you could take, right? So if Starbucks isn't satisfactory, if they're not offering you as an employee what you deem necessary for you to be happy and satisfied, why would you fight that system instead of walking away and finding a better job? Now, if there's the concept of greater good at work, where someone's like, I'm going to help my brothers and sisters and fight this together. Okay, that's a noble thing. I mean, I get it. But as an individual, why just leave? And if enough leave, whatever needed to change the Starbucks will change. I
mean, I can tell you why.
Okay.
It's now, this is just my opinion, nobody else's. If you Google somebody named Norma Ray, she was instrumental back in the day for Uninet, because she stood up for people, right? And I think these days, the reason people don't do that and they stick, and they dig in, is because they want to go down in history somehow. In union history, they were the ones who organized Starbucks, and they'll be known as the person who organized this organization. That it's more about recognition than anything else, because it's really easy to leave Starbucks and go to Dunkin' Donuts. It's really easy to leave Starbucks and go do something else. I mean, I'm with you. I don't really understand the rationale about unionizing if they have that many concerns, because you could easily go somewhere else, like you couldn't do that 80 plus years ago. So it's got to be because of recognition. I mean, why else? And then not everybody wants to Not everybody wants to lead the way when it comes to making a business profitable. These are folks that really go in thinking, I'm going to go to work and I'm going to stick it to the man and I'm going to get my benefits and then go home. That's the mentality, right? Now I'm painting everybody with a broad brush because there are some organizations that need to be unionized because they are treating their workers unfair, right?
Give me an
And these
example.
workers, I'm sorry?
Give me an example.
I'll give you one example. There's this one, or I don't know if I can mention it now. There's this one organization that actually I'll tell you afterwards. This is one organization that I do know of that how they treat their employees are absolutely horrible. It's a call center operation, and what they do is they don't have a schedule. They have people come to work, and out of the 100 people that show up to work, only the top 25 people get to stay to work for the day. And nobody knows who the top 25 are because they don't share the numbers from yesterday. People still show up, Pete.
Why?
75 go home because they know nothing else. They don't know any better. They think that's how that job runs. One of them went to the union hall. The union hall went over, and now they're in the process of being unionized.
So, Rick,
people don't know better. You'd be
on.
surprised.
Hold on. I'm more than surprised. Did they?
Some people, not all, some people, because people still show up.
But I get it. I get it in the past, right? Where if
this was last year.
Huh?
This was last year.
Okay, but we're having record unemployment right now, 3.9%. As we said, 6 million job seekers for 10.3 million jobs. No one has to put up with that, anything remotely close to it. So is the pay extraordinary? Is it, if they do make the cut for the day, there has to be some overriding reason why someone would tolerate that.
I honestly think you are underestimating how many people don't follow those numbers. They don't follow them. I've seen so many people who, because you follow those numbers to the T, so do I. That's our job. I want to know what unemployment is. You've got people out there that are working, Pete, that have no idea what unemployment is, have no idea what's happening. They just want to go to work, do what they need to do, and go home. The fact that that business is still open, operating the way that it is, about to be unionized, is baffling, man. It's baffling. But people still do it. And the reason I know this because I used to recruit for them. Actually, I think I told you, because this I can tell you. When I worked for Sears Home Improvement, I used to go to this organization's parking lot and put flyers on their windshields, telling them like, "Look, we give you a schedule. You don't have to go home if you're the bottom 75%."
That's insane. I don't.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, I probably should have done a little more research before bringing this up on the fly today, because these tweets just stood out at me. And the other piece is back to the freelance conversation. There's a very strong feeling among many workers, I may say most, who are employees of very just general employees somewhere, and that the feeling that employers should be obligated to provide things beyond the scope of the job, right? Beyond, do this job for this wage. Is there an agreement to do that? Do both parties want to enter into that agreement? If so, yes. So in benefits, I'm of the mindset that the employees would win if companies weren't beholden to so many things that the government impresses upon employers for providing, where they can instead put the money in the employee's pocket and let the employee choose. So when we talk about, they'll just focus on sick days, since that's pertinent here. Bernie Sanders, many others, maybe most others would say I mean, some of the replies of the tweets, I looked at them, it's crazy that in a modern society, employers don't have to do this. And in the US in particular, like, what a backwards place. Meanwhile, I'm thinking in many ways, the opposite where let me pay you on the front end, and you
Dude.
have the ability to, like, as an employer, you like the money's coming from somewhere, right? It's less on the front end. So again, if we're treating it like a team sport, this is what you'd end up with. But if you're treating it like an individual sport, where Ricky, I'm going to pay you what you're willing to work for, what we agree is it's good value to me, it's good value to you, however we determine it, right? That is a very personal and individual thing, and then you live your life accordingly. But once I'm obligated to do things for you when you're not working, well, then I'm taking it from someone else.
Yep.
Right. And that's how I see it. It's not to shortchange you as the employee, quite the opposite. It's giving you everything you've earned and deserve, and not sharing in the pot, so to speak. So why do you think that is not looked at that way? Because I want to be the advocate of freelance. I think I think it is the most healthy way to have a relationship for work that needs to be done. Why do you think that's such a, I don't know that we're ever going to get past this, because we're so far from that being a prevalent thought.
So I again, I can only give you my opinion based on my experience with it. And my opinion is, Pete, is that you've got in the workplace, you have all kinds of people everywhere, from your rock stars that move mountains for the cause and actually do, for the people who just do their job, right? And if organizations want to appease to everybody, right, it's not just these folks, because if you only appease to the top 10%, like Elon is doing, you're gonna have to figure out how to work, how to run the business with the top 10% only. Right? But you are going to need some people that do their job, and nothing more and nothing below, right? So if that's your middle 70% of your folks, top 10%, middle 70, bottom 20, you get rid of the bottom 20. Top 10% gets most of the money. The middle 70%, if you do something as an organization that takes away what they find valuable, what are you going to do as an organization to find the right talent for you? So to me, it's appeasing the folks. It's appeasing everybody in the bucket. Again, I'm just pulling that out of the air based on my experience. Same thing goes with the 5 for 15. I'm sure you've heard of the 5 for 15, which has been the basis for restaurant unions. They're fighting for $15 an hour, and I'm a big I don't believe in that, because I believe you should be paid what you're worth. But at the same time, there's some people who, just because of their skill set or the mentality, they cannot be paid what they're worth, but they need at least a livable wage. That's not everybody, but that's what I'm assuming, I think, why things are the way they are today, Pete.
Yeah, I don't know where this is going to ultimately end up, because I get the argument. Make no mistake, but I think it's not looking at the bigger picture. And you mentioned people don't pay attention to unemployment numbers and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I am certain that most employees don't realize what could be in their pocket as an employer. What we often call the burden, right? Which is an interesting phrase, not my word. That is the taxes and fees that go into what an employer has to pay to cut a paycheck to an employee. And as the things that are mandated by the government, the things that are just used as recruiting tools and retention tools by employees, it also treats the employee base for any organization as if it's a team sport. I keep using that phrase because I can't think of a better one, versus individual, which is what freelance does. So it's not my mission in life to have more to be a proponent of the freelance market, but I truly believe that it's a path to a much healthier relationship between workers and, though, see, I won't even call it employees and employers at that point. because that has in many ways the wrong connotation to it, where, for example, you're a freelancer who works with Four Corner Resources, but you're not our employee. I don't,
No,
far
correct.
from it. And you used to be an employee of Four Corner Resources, and go ahead and say right now, which way do you feel better? Do you feel more respected, and now that you are not an employee? I mean, hopefully you didn't feel disrespected before, but I think it's
No. With me, it's got nothing to do with respect. It's I don't feel disrespected either way. I feel respected both ways. They each have their pros and cons, Pete. Right, and it's somebody who just flipped over. Now, I was attending and I part time for 10 years, and somewhere in there I did it for 9 months. And so the con is the pro obviously is you're in command of your calendar. You are in control. You literally are your own boss. Depending on your leadership skills, that could be a very good thing or a very terrifying thing, right? And whereas on a 1099 employee, somebody who's not 1099, W-2 employee, an actual employee who is for an organization where where the next paycheck is going to come from, that safety doesn't exist in the 1099 world, right? In the 1099 world, I actually have to go out and fish, right? Whereas in a W-2 world, I'm already in the pond where I know there are fishes and I know where I'm going to eat every Friday.
really because there's been how many layoffs in the
Well, I
among
mean, yeah,
top employees? Well, but
it's you're right.
this is my point. We don't think of it in those terms, but just because you are a W-2 employee, there's no safety associated with that. I think we've had 170,000 tech workers, companies from people laid off from tech companies. They're not necessarily technical employees. Those are the ones who've kept their jobs, probably, just incidentally.
But it proves the point, though, right, Pete? Because as a W-2 employee, I don't have control over that.
Right.
As a 1099 employee, I do.
So you don't, right. So it's a false sense of security.
Yes.
Is where I'm going. So when we say pros and cons, and we can explore this in another show, because I think they're perceived pros more often than not. Is that there's security. I know the employer has my back, or takes care of me and my needs to some level, right? And that's the feeling that I think, oh, no, you don't want to rely on an employer for that. Because when times change or the tide changes, that perceived security is going to work against you when you're an independent contractor, or you approach your professional life that way. You know that you have to take care of yourself, right? When you're a W-2 employee, all the employees at Facebook and Twitter, and all the other tech companies recently who've been laid off, they just thought they were being taken care of until they weren't. And so I think there's potential for it to do more harm than good.
I'm with you. And I think I said that wrong then, right? Because yes, as a 1099 employee or a 1099 contractor, yeah, I have to go fishing, but I have the capabilities to do so, right? And it's up to me. If I don't eat this Friday, it's nobody's fault but mine. If I do eat this Friday, it's nobody's fault but mine, right?
Right.
Versus as a W-2 employee, I could do everything I want in the world. There are people right now on Facebook being laid off who are rock star workers.
Sure.
Yeah,
of course, because of course. And now they have to, as long as they anticipated the possibility of that, or even the probability of that, then fine, right? But it's those who didn't, because there's a false sense of security. And I will say, if you eat Zaxby's tater tots, it's nobody's fault but yours. But I had to get that out before I missed the window. But so that false sense of security ultimately works against them is my concern. Yeah, this isn't, so nothing I'm saying is from the employer's perspective. I'm looking to shift the dollars, not save the dollars that employers pay for benefits that are shared by the greater good, and let everyone benefit from their own efforts, right? Equally. Because when you start putting that excessive burden on employers, or they take it upon themselves, as you can see, like some of the stuff at Twitter, with just the overage that was there. Well, the numbers just don't work. And so it's going to not end well, where a freelancer who can set their own schedule and their rate and be paid what they're worth, and every dollar that they earn, that goes directly to them, that's a win. It's a win. Companies don't save money when they're hiring freelancers. In fact, they probably end up paying more, but they get more for it. So everyone benefits.
I like how you put that. You're not looking to, we just said to save the dollar, you're looking to shift it.
Right.
I like how you're putting that, because you're not focusing on just cutting costs at all costs. You're looking for shifting resources to where they're better worked, to where those resources are better acquired. They're used better, more efficiently. That makes that, I think that right there is the point of this episode. Seriously, how do you shift that dollar, right? Do you need unions to do that? Some companies, some. But I'll tell you this, for everybody out there listening, if you are a leader of people, obviously, and you listen to what they say and you take care of them, whether they're employees or contractors, employees, because contractors don't unionize, whether they're employees or contractors, if you take care of them and their values, their what they value, you value, no union would ever come into your office. It's not going to happen.
No, you're absolutely correct. And my theory, until proven otherwise, is that the best way to show for someone to feel valued is to be treated as an individual.
Yep.
And to be
yes,
paid in the case of compensation, given, in the case of things that are non-comp related, what they're worth. And I don't think that's easy. It may be impossible to do if it's done based on the group versus the individual.
That makes sense.
So I mean, here's what so if an employee's going to, if an employee makes $50,000 a year, do you think most employees know? And I suspect not. A W-2 employee, when you add in what I consider to be the weighted cost of that, which is what I mentioned burden before, but burden is really just taxes and payrolls, and call that somewhere between taxes and payroll fees. Call it somewhere between 11 and 20%, depending on the state. Or maybe 12, 13 to 20%. That's off the top. That's right out of the employee's pocket. So the employer pays it, doesn't go to the employee, it goes to the government, right? Gone. Bye. You'll never get it back. It's not coming back to you, maybe incrementally, but for the most part, it's not. And then you have other benefits on top of that. So and those vary wildly, from the extreme to minimal, depending on the company. So but on average, I tend to just rough math that always think if someone's getting paid 50, it's costing their employer 75 grand. Do you think that's close at 50%?
Benefits. That's not including benefits.
It is. No,
it is. Benefits. Oh God, yes. Yes.
So do you think most employees are faced with the choice, all right, Ricky, you're going to do this job, you're going to do it 40 hours a week. Here's, we agree on what the work is. Great. Everyone's happy there. Do you want $50,000 and I'm going to pay for all these other things, including, taxes and fees, or do you want 75,000?
I know you want a simple answer, man, but I can't give you
one. And then what the 75 means, you're only going to get paid for when you're working.
Yeah.
Because that's what I need of you. Right. That's what you're agreeing to do. That's the agreement. But with that extra $25,000, you get to save it. You get to prepare for, if you're sick, you get to prepare for when you want to take off, take vacations. And we're going to have much more flexibility as a result of that, because you're not going to be tied to what I'm also obligating to everyone else. It's only what you get.
So since you put it that way, you put numbers to numbers. Here's what I anticipate is going to happen if we ever come to a life where that's a reality. The smart people, the smart employees who don't want the aggravation of running their own business, doing their own taxes, are going to say no to that. The smart people who want more freedom and they want more control, they're going to say yes to that. The not so strategic people who see those numbers and they're like, oh my God, I want $25,000 more, and don't understand what it means to be your own employer, your own boss, they're going to go with the bigger amount and fail. That's
Well,
what's going to happen.
we haven't prepared people to operate under that.
We have
Under that agreement,
100%
right?
right.
We tell people, we tell young people to focus on getting a job, not don't take that approach. And we always end up here, and you know how strongly I feel about that. I know you agree too. Solving it's an entirely different challenge. So maybe we'll tackle that one at a later date.
I'll tell you how I'm going to throw in my 2 cents on solving this. I grew up in an era, Pete, where it was beaten into my head. The only way I could succeed is not by being a plumber. It's not by being an electrician. It's by getting a 4-year degree. That turned out not to be true, not 100% true, right? No. Because right now, man, you got those trade workers, man, that are making money hand over fist. And I know a couple of them who I went to school with, who went to trade school afterwards, they're millionaires right now, right? So that turned out to be not the case. How I can combat this is how I raised my son. I've got a 9-year-old, right? And he's got just 10 more years before he gets out there. And my lesson to him is going to be, look, do you want to make money? Start a business. Be your own boss. Start a business. You want to be a lawyer? You want to be a scientist? Yeah, you are going to have to go to school for that, right? But if you want to make money and really, really be in control, you should start your own business and forget about this corporate 9 to 5. And whatever he likes, right? Because I'll tell him, look, if he wants to be an electrician, go ahead. I'll help him with it, right? Because that's in demand right now, along with a lot of other trades out there. So I think the best way I can combat that is to the person that I brought into this world or helped bring into this world. That's another debate. I'm going to go ahead and raise him to be a citizen to where he stands on his own 2 feet, and then he makes his own decisions about his financial future.
Yeah, I think that's good. That's really good advice. I mean, I think there's a big curve ahead for us as a society if we can to figure out how to really embrace that and help young people realize that default path of going to college is not required, for success, and happiness and satisfaction. And yeah, the world doesn't really tell you that very often, at least not here in our country. And instead, it's like stay in school. Well, maybe, right? Maybe.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's well, this is another episode. The Department of Education was started by who?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. That's another show.
So Bernie, thank you for providing the content for today and your tweet. I don't think that is necessarily the path for respect and dignity that you want for employees. I'm going to think more about that because it just, I don't know how we reconcile it. I don't know how we get from what seems to be a situation that no one's really happy about to one that on the free, in the union side, because it just seems like a big fight. And every time I hear union, the word union, because I'm in Florida, it's always someone's fighting about it. Right?
Yeah.
I don't hear anyone fighting in the freelance world, Ricky. I don't. No one's complaining. Right? You have a lot of happy people on both sides. Happy customers.
That is true.
Happy workers. Happy world. And that is something we need to keep doing our part to perpetuate and to promote. So we'll keep doing that.
Absolutely. And if Bernie Sanders ever becomes president, it'd be interesting to see if who still calls him Bernie. I
All
don't
of
think
us.
nobody's going to call him President Bernie.
Well, hopefully,
Hopefully that
I
doesn't
don't know.
happen.
He can stay in his chair with his mittens and his arms folded and tweet occasionally. I think we're getting all we need out of Bernie.
Hey,
for
Bernie,
a
what's your
while.
biggest accomplishment in your entire political career? I was a meme. Poor
Yeah,
guy.
he's done a little more than that, I think.
I
But
know he has.
I don't know. I think the presidential ship has sailed on that. We won't get a chance
I
to
don't know. I
figure
still
out what
think
we
he's
call
got
him.
it. That guy I love listening to him talk, man. It is a hilarious train wreck.
He's
I
an
love
angry
it.
dude, that's for sure. But all right, man. Well, thanks so much as always. We will tackle another subject next week, and
Yes, sir.
have a great rest of the day. And thanks for listening.
Have a good one, folks. Remember, check us out on your favorite podcast platform. Right, Pete?
That's it.
All right.
Yeah, and you can email us in anytime questions at hirecalling at fourcornerresources.com. Hirecalling at fourcornerresources.com. Would love to hear from you. And I think we have some questions that have piled up recently, Ricky. So Q&A next week. Let's do it.
We'll do that, Pete. Boy, you forgot there for a second. Are you being overworked? You need representation? Let me know.
I know. Call my rep.
Have a good one, folks.
Goodbye.